The Lingering Echo. A drama of love, regret, and healing. Chapter 1. The Empty House. The house was too quiet now. Claire had always thought she'd grow old in this home. Listening to the creak of the floorboards under David's footsteps, the distant hum of the radio as he tinkered in the garage, the soft rustle of newspaper pages turning in the evenings. But now, the silence was suffocating. 3 months had passed since the funeral. 3 months of empty mornings, of half-spoken conversations to a ghost, of waking up expecting to find him beside her, only to remember again and again that he was gone. She stood in the doorway of his study, her fingers tracing the edge of the wooden desk he had loved so much. The room still smelled faintly of his cologne, that warm, earthy scent that had always made her feel safe. His books were still stacked haphazardly on the shelves, his favorite pen left uncapped on the desk, as if he had just stepped away for a moment. Claire took a deep breath and forced herself to move. She had promised herself she would start sorting through his things today. The thought made her chest tighten, but she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. She began with the drawers, receipts, old business cards, a half-finished crossword puzzle. Then, beneath a stack of files, her fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. A small ornate wooden box, one she had never seen before. Her breath caught. The box was locked. Chapter 2. The Locked Box. Claire turned the box over in her hands, studying the intricate carvings along its edges, delicate swirls that resembled waves, or perhaps the branches of a tree. There was no key. She frowned. David had never been one for secrets. He was open, sometimes to a fault, always wearing his heart on his sleeve. What could he have hidden away in here? She searched the desk again, rifling through drawers, checking, beneath papers. Nothing. Then, on a whim, she reached behind the bookshelf, where David had always kept spare change and loose screws. Her fingers closed around a small, cold object, a key. Her hands trembled as she fitted it into the lock. The mechanism clicked softly, and the lid lifted with a whisper of aged wood. Inside, neatly stacked, were letters. Dozens of them, each one addressed to her. Chapter 3. The First Letter. The paper was crisp beneath her fingers, the ink slightly faded. David's handwriting, familiar, looping, a little messy, in the way he always wrote when he was in a hurry. "My dearest Claire," it began. She swallowed hard. "If you're reading this, then I suppose I never found the courage to give it to you. There are things I've wanted to say for years, things I could never bring myself to speak aloud. Maybe it's easier this way." Her vision blurred. She wiped at her eyes roughly, forcing herself to keep reading. "Do you remember the year we lost the baby?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "I never told you how much it broke me. I thought I had to be strong for you, so I buried it. But sometimes, when you weren't looking, I cried. I still dream about it, Claire. I still wonder who they would have been." A sob escaped her. She had thought they had grieved together. She had never known he carried this alone. Chapter 4. The Hidden Regrets. The letters came in no particular order. Some were dated, others not. Each one tore open another wound she hadn't known existed. One spoke of his fear of failure, how he had nearly quit his job years ago, terrified he wasn't providing enough for her. Another confessed a betrayal, a brief, drunken kiss with an old flame at a reunion, one he had never mentioned because he couldn't bear to hurt her. The most painful was the one about his dream, the one he had given up. "I wanted to travel," he wrote. "Just pack a bag and go, see the world with you." But then life got in the way. and I convinced myself it was a foolish dream. Now I wonder what we missed." Claire clutched the letter to her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. How had she not known? How had she never seen? Chapter 5. The Final Letter. The last letter was different. It wasn't tucked neatly with the others, but hidden beneath the box's velvet lining, as if he had hesitated even to include it. Her hand shook as she unfolded it. "Claire," it began. "No, dearest. No, my love." Just her name, stark and raw. "I don't know how to say this. I'm sorry. For our last fight, for the things I said, for walking out when you needed me most." She remembered that night. A stupid argument. Something trivial about money or chores, escalating into harsh words. He had left, slamming the door behind him. He had died the next day. A car accident, a wet road, a moment of distraction. I was angry, but not at you, at myself, at time, at the way life slips through our fingers. I wish I had stayed. I wish I had held you instead. Please forgive me." The letter slipped from her hands. She had blamed herself for years. If she hadn't yelled, if she hadn't pushed, if she had just let it go, but he had blamed himself too. Chapter 6. Letting Go. The sun was setting when Claire finally moved. She sat at David's desk, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper. Her pen hovered over the page before she began to write. "My love," she started. She told him everything, that she forgave him, that she hoped he could forgive her, that she missed him every second of every day. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the box with his. Then she closed the lid, turned the key, and let out a long, shuddering breath. She would keep the letters, but she would no longer be trapped by them. The house was still quiet, but for the first time in months, it didn't feel quite so empty. The Last Promise. A mystery of secrets, betrayal, and redemption. Chapter 2. The Delayed Email. Daniel Carter had spent the past 6 months trying to forget the sound of the gunshot. It echoed in his dreams. Sharp, sudden, final. The way Jake's body had crumpled. The way the blood had seeped into the carpet. Dark and irreversible. The police had called it a suicide. Daniel had called it a lie. But grief was a heavy thing, and doubt was heavier. So he buried himself in work, in whiskey, in anything that could dull the ache of losing his best friend. Then, on a rain-slicked Tuesday evening, his laptop chimed. An email from Jake. Daniel's breath locked in his chest. The timestamp read, "Sent 6 months ago. Delivered now." His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. A draft? A glitch? Some cruel trick? He clicked it open. The subject line was blank. The message was only 5 words. Find her. 42.36 yuan, 71.0589. Coordinates, and below that, a single name. Lena Voss. Chapter 3. The Woman in the Photograph. The address led him to a weathered brownstone in Boston's North End. Daniel stood across the street, collar turned up against the wind, watching. The windows were dark, the stoop empty. He had expected something, a sign, a revelation. Instead, there was only silence. He pulled out his phone and searched the name. Lena Voss. A handful of results, an old LinkedIn profile, a mention in a college alumni newsletter, and then, buried deep in an archived news article. Local woman. Questioned in disappearance of CEO's son. Daniel's pulse spiked. He clicked the link. The article was from 8 years ago. A grainy photo showed a young woman with sharp cheekbones and wary eyes. Lena. The missing man was Richard Hale, heir to Hale Pharmaceuticals. The case had gone cold. But Jake's name was nowhere in the story. So why had he known her? Why had he wanted Daniel to find her? Chapter 4. The Hidden Connection. He tracked her down at a diner near the waterfront. Lena Voss was thinner than in the photograph. Her dark hair streaked with silver. Her hands wrapped tight around a coffee mug, like she was afraid it might vanish. Daniel slid into the booth across from her. "You don't know me," he said. "But I think you knew Jake Morrison." Her fingers twitched. A flicker of something, fear, grief, crossed her face. "You're late," she whispered. Daniel frowned. "What?" "He said you'd come. Years ago." Her voice was raw. "I waited. You never did." Ice slithered down his spine. "Jake told you about me." She laughed. A hollow sound. "He told me everything." Then she reached into her bag and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "Read it," she said. "Then decide if you really want to know." Chapter 5. The Confession. The letter was in Jake's handwriting. Daniel. "If you're reading this, I'm dead. And if I'm dead, it wasn't an accident. Remember Richard Hale, the guy who vanished? I lied. I knew what happened to him. I helped cover it up. Lena didn't kill him, but she was there, and so was I. We were young, stupid. Richard was drunk, violent. He hurt her. I stepped in. Things went too far. I buried the body. Lena ran. I swore I'd protect her, but I think someone knows. If I'm gone, they're coming for her next. Find her. Keep her safe. It's the last thing I'll ever ask you." Jake. Daniel's hands shook. His best friend. A murderer? No. A protector. Chapter 6. The Truth or the Lie. Lena's eyes were wet. "He saved my life that night." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And now, someone's after you." She nodded. "I think they always were." The pieces clicked. Jake's paranoia before he died. The way he'd insisted his apartment was bugged. The suicide that left no note. Daniel had a choice. Walk away, let the past stay buried, or dig it up and risk everything. He thought of Jake's laugh, his loyalty, the way he'd taken the fall for Daniel a dozen times when they were kids. "Tell me what you need," he said. Lena reached into her pocket and slid a key across the table. "Jake left something for you," she said, "in case it went wrong." Chapter 7. The Last Promise. Kept. The storage unit smelled of dust and old paper. Inside was a box. Inside the box, a flash drive. The files were damning. Emails, bank transfers, a trail leading straight to Richard Hale's father. Proof that he'd known. Proof that he'd wanted revenge. Jake had been ready to expose it. Then he'd died. Daniel looked at Lena. "What do you want to do?" She touched the locket at her throat. A gift from Jake, he realized. "End it," she said. So he did. The story went public. The police reopened the case. The Hale empire crumbled. And on the day the headlines broke, Daniel took Lena to Jake's grave. She knelt, pressed her palm to the cold stone, and whispered, "It's over." Daniel left the letter there, tucked beneath a rock. The last promise, finally kept. The weight of silence. A psychological descent into grief and unanswered questions. Chapter 15. The Last Lie. The words played on a loop in Emma's head. "I'm fine, Em. Really." Leah had smiled when she said it. That same tired, practiced smile she'd worn for months. the one Emma had accepted without question. Now standing in her sister's empty apartment, the lie felt like a physical weight. Fine. Leah had been fine when Emma left that night. Fine when she texted good night. Fine when the coroner estimated she had swallowed the pills. Emma's fingers curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. Fine. What a fucking joke. Chapter 16. The Journals. She found them under the bed. 3 leather-bound notebooks, their pages worn from use. Leah had always written poems, thoughts, grocery lists. But these weren't lists. They were confessions. October 12th, he's outside again. I can see his shadow under the door. November 3rd. I changed my number. He found it in 2 days. December 17th. I told Dr. Shaw. She thinks it's paranoia. Maybe it is. But what if it's not? Emma's breath came in short, sharp bursts. Who the hell was here? And why had Leah never told her? Chapter 17. The cracks in the story. She tracked down Dr. Shaw. The therapist's office was all soft lighting and neutral tones, the kind of place designed to soothe. It made Emma want to scream. Leah never mentioned a stalker to me. Dr. Shaw said carefully. She did express feelings of being watched, but given her history of anxiety, you thought she was imagining it. Dr. Shaw hesitated. Without evidence, it's hard to. She wrote it down. Dates, times, details. Emma. The therapist's voice softened. Sometimes, the mind creates threats to explain the unexplainable. Leah was struggling. Deeply. Emma stood abruptly, chair scraping. She was scared. Dr. Shaw sighed. Fear can be very real, even if the source isn't. Emma left before she said something she'd regret. Chapter 18. The Shadow Under the Door. She went back to Leah's apartment, stood in the doorway, stared at the floor. I can see his shadow under the door. Emma crouched, running her fingers along the worn wood. No gap, no space for light or shadows to slip through. Her throat tightened. Had Leah imagined that too? Chapter 19. The Man Who Wasn't There. She found a name in the journals. Daniel. No last name. Just a scribbled note. D from the cafe. He knows where I live. Emma went to the cafe Leah frequented. Showed the barista a photo. Oh yeah, Leah came in all the time. The barista frowned. Daniel. Tall guy. Glasses. He's a regular. 2. Emma's pulse spiked. Do you know his last name? Sorry, but he's here most mornings. If you... Emma didn't wait to hear the rest. Chapter 20. The Truth or the Delusion. She came back the next day, and the next. On the 3rd morning, a man walked in. Tall, glasses, just like the barista said. Emma's hands shook as she approached. Daniel. He turned, polite but puzzled. Yes, I'm Leah's sister. His expression didn't change. Leah, from the cafe. You knew her. Daniel's brow furrowed. I don't think so. I'm sorry. Emma's stomach dropped. Are you sure? He gave her an odd look. Positive. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him remember. But the confusion in his eyes was genuine. Had Leah made him up, or had he made her forget? Chapter 21. The Weight of Words, Unspoken. She sat in Leah's closet, surrounded by her clothes, her scent, her absence. The journals lay open in her lap. I'm so tired of being afraid. No one believes me. Maybe I am crazy. Emma pressed her forehead to the pages, tears bleeding into the ink. She would never know the truth. Only the weight of the words they'd never said, the silence they'd both kept, and the goodbye that had come too soon. Chapter 22. The Fading Echo. Mark opened his eyes to the scent of sizzling bacon and the soft hum of Sarah's voice, drifting from the kitchen. His heart clenched. This was the same morning again, the same cruel trick of time. He sat up, slowly, running his hands over his face. How many times had he lived this day now? 10, 20. Each loop was shorter than the last. Each reset, stealing another piece of Sarah's memory. Yesterday, she had still known his name. The day before, she had laughed at his stupid jokes. Now, as he stepped into the kitchen, her smile was polite, distant. "Morning," she said, turning the eggs in the pan. "Coffee's fresh." Mark swallowed. Hard. "Thanks." She didn't look at him the way she used to, like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. Her gaze was empty, as if he were a stranger sharing her kitchen. She's slipping away. Chapter 23. The Ghost of What Was. Breakfast passed in silence. Mark studied her face, the way her nose scrunched when she sipped her coffee, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. These were the things he had memorized, the things he couldn't bear to lose. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, testing. Sarah blinked, as if surprised he'd spoken. "Yeah, fine." "No, you were snoring again." "No, you stole the covers." Just a blank, indifferent response. Mark's chest ached. He reached across the table, brushing his fingers over her wrist. "Sarah," she pulled her hand away, frowning. "Do I know you?" The words hit him like a bullet. Chapter 24. The Last Loop. Mark stumbled outside, gasping for air. The world spun around him. This was worse than death. Watching her forget him piece by piece. He had tried everything. Writing notes for her to find. Recording messages. Begging her to remember. But time was a thief, and it stole her from him. A little more each cycle. He knew what was coming. The next reset would be the last. She wouldn't recognize him at all. And then, would the loop end? Would he wake up to a world where she was truly gone? Chapter 25. The Choice. When the loop reset again, Sarah wasn't in the kitchen. Mark's pulse roared in his ears as he searched the house. He found her in the bedroom, folding laundry. His laundry, with the careful movements of someone performing a chore for a guest. "Sarah," he whispered. She turned, her expression polite but puzzled. "Can I help you?" His knees nearly gave out. This was it, the final stage. She didn't know him, not even a flicker. He could stay. Live this day forever, even if she never remembered. Or he could let go. Chapter 26. The Goodbye. Mark sat beside her on the bed. "I love you," he said, knowing she wouldn't understand. Sarah gave him a small, confused smile. "That's sweet?" He laughed, tears burning his eyes. Yeah, it is." He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't fight the loop. Chapter 27. The Morning After. Mark woke up alone. The bed was cold. The house was silent. No sizzling bacon. No humming. He sat up staring at the empty space beside him. Sarah was gone. Not just from the house. From time itself. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Mark exhaled. It was over. And somehow, that was okay. Chapter 28. The Box in the Attic. Dr. Eleanor Carter had spent years sifting through forgotten relics of the past, but nothing had prepared her for the small, water-stained box hidden beneath the floorboards of the old Victorian house. The attic smelled of dust and mildew. the air thick with the weight of decades. She pried open the rusted latch with careful fingers, her breath catching as she saw the stack of yellowed envelopes inside. The top one bore a faded postmark, 1945s, and was addressed in elegant looping script to My Dearest James. Eleanor's pulse quickened. These weren't just letters. They were a secret, one that had been buried for over 70 years. She unfolded the first page, the paper brittle beneath her touch. My love, if only the world knew how I ache for you. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just history. This was a love story. Chapter 29. The Ink of the Past. The letters were signed only with the initial A, but Eleanor pieced together the story like an archaeologist uncovering fragments of a lost civilization. A was Arthur Whitmore, a young medic stationed in France during the final days of World War II. James was his lieutenant, his best friend, his Moore. Eleanor read late into the night, the words painting a world of stolen glances and whispered promises. Last night, when you touched my hand under the table, I thought my heart would stop. If anyone had seen... She could almost hear the fear in his words, the desperate longing tangled with terror. This wasn't just romance, it was rebellion. Chapter 30. The Photograph. Beneath the letters, Eleanor found a single photograph. Two young men in uniform, standing close, but not touching. One dark-haired, serious, James. The other, lighter-haired with a hesitant smile, Arthur. Their eyes told the truth. Their bodies couldn't. Eleanor traced the edge of the photo, wondering how many times Arthur had hidden it away. How many times he had been forced to pretend. She turned it over, scrawled on the back in faded pencil, Paris, 1944, the only time we were free. Her throat tightened. She had to find out what happened to them. Chapter 31. The Survivor. The trail led her to a nursing home on the outskirts of London. Arthur Whitmore was 97 years old, his hands gnarled with age, his blue eyes still sharp. When Eleanor placed the box on his bedside table, his breath hitched. "You found them," he whispered. She hadn't expected him to admit it so easily. "I did." For a long moment, Arthur stared at the letters, as if they might vanish. Then softly, "I thought I burned them all." Eleanor hesitated. "Do you want to talk about him?" Arthur's fingers brushed the photograph. "I never have." Chapter 32. The Truth Unfolds. The story came out in fragments, like pages torn from a book. How they met during training. How James had been the first to reach for him in the dark. How they stole moments, a touch here, a kiss there. Always afraid, always desperate. We knew what would happen if we were caught. Arthur said, his voice rough, "But God, it was worth it." Eleanor swallowed. What happened to him? Arthur's face crumpled. "He died in my arms, not in battle, a fever, and I couldn't even mourn him the way I wanted to." The silence that followed was heavier than grief. Chapter 33. The Decision. Eleanor hesitated before asking the question that had brought her here. "Do you want the letters to be seen?" Arthur closed his eyes. For a man who had spent a lifetime hiding, the idea of exposure must have been terrifying. But when he opened them again, his gaze was steady. Yes. Chapter 34. The Legacy. The Art Museum exhibit opened on a quiet Tuesday morning. Love in the Shadows, A Soldier's Secret Letters, was displayed under soft lighting, the words preserved behind glass. Visitors paused, reading. some with tears in their eyes. Arthur didn't attend, but Eleanor brought him a photo of the display. He held it for a long time before speaking. "We existed," he whispered, and for the first time in 70 years, it was no longer a secret, it was history. Chapter 35. The House of Echoes. Lillian Graves had never believed in ghosts until she inherited Blackwood Manor. The estate loomed at the end of a winding, overgrown path. Its Gothic spires clawing at the storm-heavy sky. The lawyer had handed her the keys with a grimace, muttering about unfortunate history. Lillian had scoffed. She was a woman of logic, of science. Hauntings were for children's tales. But that first night, as the grandfather clock struck midnight, the house breathed. A whisper slithered from the walls. "Don't go!" Lillian froze, her fingers tightening around her teacup. The voice was not her own, and it was coming from the hallway. Chapter 36. The First Spectre. She followed the sound, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. The air thickened with the scent of lavender. And something metallic. Blood? At the end of the corridor, a woman in a tattered Victorian dress knelt, clutching a child's hands. "Mama has to leave," the woman murmured, her voice frayed with tears. The child, a girl no older than 6, shook her head. "You promised you'd stay." Lillian's breath caught. The woman turned, her hollow eyes locking onto hers, seeing her, before both figures dissolved like smoke. The hallway was empty again, but Lillian's hands were trembling. Chapter 37. The Midnight Replays. Night after night, the ghosts returned, a soldier kissing his sweetheart before vanishing into mist, an old man sobbing at an empty cradle, a brother turning away as his sister screamed, "Don't leave me!" Each farewell carved itself into Lillian's bones. She scoured the manor's records, uncovering tragedies, suicides, disappearances, children abandoned. Blackwood Manor was not just a house. It was a tomb for unfinished goodbyes, and it wanted something from her. Chapter 38. The Unseen Mirror. The ghosts grew bolder. They flickered at the edges of her vision. A hand on her shoulder, a breath against her neck. The whispers became clearer. "Say it. You know why you're here." Lillian's dreams twisted into memories she had buried. Her mother's hospital room, the beeping machines, the last rattling breath. She had never said goodbye. She had run. Instead. Chapter 39. The Confession. On the 7th night, the house shook. The walls wept blood. The chandelier swung like a noose. The ghosts crowded around her, their voices a chorus of grief. "Speak!" Lillian fell to her knees, tears burning her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she screamed. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I couldn't say it." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, warmth. Hand, soft and real, cupped her face. Her mother's voice, gentle. "It's all right, my love. I knew." Chapter 40. The Silence. Dawn spilled through the stained glass windows. The house stood still. No whispers. No ghosts. Lillian sat on the stairs, her chest lighter than it had been in years. She had carried her grief like a coffin. Now, at last, she had laid it down. Blackwood Manor was just a house again, and for the first time in a decade, Lillian Graves wept without shame. Chapter 41. The Memory Machine. The lab was silent except for the hum of the machine. Dr. Elias Carter stood before his creation. Its sleek metallic surface reflecting the sterile blue light of the monitors. The neural redactor, a device designed to pinpoint and excise memories, like a surgeon removing a tumor. On the screen before him, a brain scan pulsed with activity, clusters of neurons lighting up in vibrant red where grief had taken root. "We don't have to carry the weight of loss anymore," he had told the board. "We can cut it out," and they had believed him. But now, as the first human trials concluded, the reports were not of relief. They spoke of hollowness, a void where something vital had been carved away. Chapter 42. The Test Subjects. Elias reviewed the files again, his fingers pressing into his temples. Subject number 12. "I don't remember my brother's face anymore, but I still wake up crying." Subject 19. "It's like, I know something's missing, but I can't remember what." Subject 27. "I feel lighter, but I don't feel better." He had expected gratitude. Instead, he found himself staring into the eyes of people who had lost more than just pain. They had lost meaning. And then there was Subject 34. His wife. Chapter 43. The Last Goodbye. Mara had always been the stronger one. When their son, Daniel, had died in the way accident, Elias had buried himself in work. Mara had grieved openly, fiercely, her sorrow a living thing. But 6 months later, she stood in his lab, her hands steady as she signed the consent form. "I can't carry this anymore," she whispered. Elias had programmed the machine himself. He knew exactly which memories to target. The hospital room, the sound of flatlining monitors, the way Daniel's small hand had felt growing cold in theirs. But as Mara lay on the gurney, the neural headset humming to life, something in him rebelled. Chapter 44. The Epiphany. The machine whirred, seconds from activation. Elias saw it then. Not just the pain in Mara's memories, but the love. The way Daniel had laughed when Elias tossed him into the air. The way Mara had sung him to sleep. The way his small arms had wrapped around their necks, trusting and warm. Grief wasn't just the absence of a person. It was the echo of their presence. To erase the sorrow was to erase the them. "Stop." His hand slammed down on the emergency shutoff. The machine powered down. Mara's eyes flew open, tears spilling over. "Why did you stop it?" Elias pulled her into his arms. "Because we can't lose him twice." Chapter 45. The Weight of Love. That night, Elias dreamt of Daniel. Not the hospital, not the funeral, but the last time they had been whole. Daniel on his shoulders, pointing at the stars, demanding to know each one's name. When he woke, Mara was already awake, staring at a photo on her phone. "I don't want to forget," she said softly. Elias nodded. He knew what he had to do. Chapter 46. The Destruction. The lab was dark when he returned. The machine glinted under the emergency lights, its promise of oblivion now a grotesque temptation. Elias didn't hesitate. The crowbar crashed into the console, sparks flying as circuits shattered. Again, until the screen flickered and died. He stood there, chest heaving, surrounded by the wreckage of his ambition. For the first time in months, he felt whole. Chapter 47. The Remembering. Mara found him there hours later. She didn't speak, just took his hand, her fingers threading through his. Together, they walked out of the lab. The grief was still there, but so was Daniel. Final words. We do not erase the past to heal. We carry it. We honor it. We live. Chapter 48. The Weight of Goodbye. The studio was quieter than usual. The kind of silence that pressed against Lila Cole's eardrums. Like a physical weight, the dim glow of the control room monitors cast long shadows across her face, highlighting the hollows beneath her cheekbones, the faint tremor in her hands as she adjusted the headphones. She had spent a lifetime chasing perfection in her music. But this was different. This wasn't just another album. This was the last thing she would ever say to the people who had shaped her, broken her, loved her. She took a slow breath, the ache in her ribs a constant reminder of the illness gnawing at her from the inside. The doctors had given her timelines, numbers, percentages, all of them meaningless in the face of what she needed to do. She had no time for treatments that would only buy her a few more months of exhaustion. No, she would spend whatever time she had left here, in this studio, pouring every last ounce of herself into these songs. The first track was for her father. Lila closed her eyes, fingers resting lightly on the piano keys. She hadn't seen him in over a decade, not since he'd walked out on her and her mother, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and a silence so heavy it had taken years for her to find her voice again. She had spent so much of her life angry, writing songs filled with venom, with accusations, with the kind of pain that could only come from a child who had been left behind. But now, with death sitting in the room with her, the anger felt like a weight she could no longer carry. Her hands moved, the first chord spilling out, slow, melancholic, a melody that felt like an outstretched hand. The lyrics came in fragments at first, half-formed apologies, and questions she had never dared to ask aloud. Did you ever think of me? Did you ever regret it? The song wasn't forgiveness, not quite. It was something more complicated than that, an acknowledgement that some wounds never fully heal, but that didn't mean they had to define her forever. By the time she finished, her cheeks were wet. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, shaking her head at the irony. She had spent her career singing about heartbreak, but it had never felt like this. This wasn't performance. This wasn't for an audience. This was the raw, unvarnished truth, and it terrified her. Act 2. The songs left unsung. The second track was for Daniel. Daniel, who had been her first real love, who had held her hand through the early days of her career when she was still, playing dive bars and praying for a record deal. Daniel, who had loved her too much, who had watched her rise to fame with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. They had been young, and she had been selfish, too caught up in the whirlwind of success to notice the way he had started to fade in the background of her life. She hadn't spoken to him in years. Last she'd heard, he was married, living somewhere, upstate, a quiet life far removed from the chaos of the industry. She wondered if he ever listened to her music, if he ever thought about her at all. The song for him was softer than the one for her father, a bittersweet ode to the kind of love that could only exist in the past tense. She sang about late-night drives, about the way he used to laugh at her terrible jokes, about the last fight they'd had, the one she had been too proud to walk back from. I should have called. I should have tried. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had left to give. Her producer, Marcus, had been silent through most of the recording process, giving her the space she needed. But when she finished this one, he leaned forward, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Lila, you know people are going to hear this, right? Once it's out, there's no taking it back. She met his gaze, her own steady, despite the storm inside her. I know. Act 3. The album the world wasn't ready for. The album released 3 weeks after her death. Lila had planned it all. The quiet announcement, the lack of promotion, the simple black cover with nothing but the title in small silver letters. The weight of goodbye. She had wanted it to speak for itself, and it did. Fans listened in stunned silence. Critics scrambled to put their emotions into words. And the people she had sung about, her father, Daniel, her mother, her best friend who had drifted away, found themselves sitting in cars or kitchens or empty rooms, hearing her voice one last time. Her memorial was held on a rainy afternoon in the city where she had gotten her start. The church was packed, standing room only, every face a story, every person a thread in the tapestry of her life. When the final song played, The Weight of Goodbye, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still broken bonds that couldn't be fully mended, words left unsaid, regrets that would linger. But in that moment, as her voice filled the air one last time, it was enough, and then the music faded, and she was gone. Chapter 49. The Girl Who Would Not Forget. The village of Black Hollow had always been a place of quiet sorrow. Nestled between mist-laden hills and a forest that seemed to swallow sound, it was a town that knew grief intimately. But grief, in Black Hollow, was not something one carried for long. There was a way to be rid of it, a trade, a bargain, a whispered agreement made in the dead of night. The dealer came when the morning bells rang. Anya had seen it before, the way families would line up outside their homes, their faces hollow, with loss, waiting for the shadowy figure in his long, tattered coat. He never spoke much, only nodded as they offered up their memories, the sound of a mother's laughter, the warmth of a father's embrace, the last words of a lover. In exchange, he gave them peace, a numbness, a forgetting. When her brother Lev died, Anya knew the dealer would come for her too. She sat by Lev's body in the dim candlelight of their small home. Her fingers curled around his cold hand. He looked like he was sleeping, except for the stillness. The villagers had already begun to murmur, their voices low and urgent. She should call the dealer. It's not right to hold on like this. But Anya refused. Act 2. The Weight of Remembering. The dealer arrived at midnight. He stood in the doorway, his face obscured by the brim of his hat, his gloved hands folded neatly in front of him. The air around him smelled of damp, earth, and something faintly metallic, like old coins. "You know why I'm here," he said. His voice was smooth, almost kind. Anya didn't look up. "I'm not giving him to you," the dealer exhaled, as if he had expected this. "Pain is a heavy thing to carry, Anya. Let me take it from you." She tightened her grip on Lev's hand. "No." For the first time, the dealer hesitated. Then, with a slow tilt of his head, he said, "You will change your mind." And then he was gone. The days that followed were agony. Every morning, Anya woke with the crushing weight of Lev's absence. She saw him in the corner of her eye, his favorite coat hanging by the door, his half-finished carving on the table. The memories were sharp, relentless. The way he used to grin when he told stupid jokes. The way he had held her when their parents died. The sound of his voice, rough with fever, whispering, "It's all right, Anya. It's all right." The villagers watched her with pity and unease. They had all made the trade. They had all let go. "Why do you do this to yourself?" asked Marta, the baker's wife, her eyes empty in the way of those who had given too much away. "It doesn't have to hurt." Anya clenched her jaw. "Yes, it does." Act 3. The Dealer's Vault. She began to notice things. The dealer never aged. She had seen old portraits in the town hall, records of Black Hollow stretching back generations. And in every painting, every faded photograph, there he was, the same sharp angles of his face, the same knowing tilt of his head. Then there were the whispers. Some of the oldest villagers spoke in hushed tones about the other memories, the ones not tied to grief. A young man who had traded his first in kiss for luck in love. A woman who had given up the memory of her child's birth to forget the pain of it. The dealer did not just take sorrow, he took life. Anya waited until the next funeral. Old man Davor, who had lived alone for years, and followed the dealer when he left the village. He walked into the woods, his steps unhurried, until he reached a door hidden in the side of a hill. Anya held her breath as she watched him unlock it and disappear inside. She waited, then she followed. The vault was endless. Jars lined the walls, glowing faintly with something that pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside each one, memories, laughter, tears, whispered promises, last breaths, thousands of them. And at the center of the room, the dealer stood before a great, mirror-like pool. He lifted a jar, Davor's memories, and poured them into the water. The liquid shimmered, and for a moment, Anya saw Davor's face reflected in it. Then the dealer drank, and he grew younger. Anya's stomach turned. He wasn't just taking their grief. He was feeding on it. The ending, fire and freedom. She didn't hesitate. While the dealer slept, if he ever truly slept, she returned with a torch. The jars shattered like glass, the memories inside bursting into sparks of light as they burned. The dealer woke screaming, his hands clawing at the air as his stolen years unraveled. "You don't understand," he snarled, his voice cracking with age. They wanted to forget. Anya stood in the heart of the fire, watching as the past reclaimed itself. "No," she said. They just didn't know they could survive remembering. The vault collapsed, and in the village below, the people of Black Hollow woke with a sudden, terrible clarity. Marta remembered her stillborn child. Old man Davor's nephew recalled the sound of his uncle's voice. And Anya held Lev's memory close. And for the first time since his death, she wept. It hurt, but she would never let go again.